Must be it. Yeah, that's where they're gonna show up, I guess.
Why that is.
I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone to the Laverne Planning Commission March 25th, 2025 meeting at 6:52 PM. We do have a quorum. Our first item of business is to approve the meeting minutes from February 25th, 2025 regular meeting and March 11th, 2025 workshop. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to accept as submitted.
Motion to accept. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. We do not have any public comments this evening that I'm aware of. Item number 3, recommendation of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen rezoning of property requested by Equitable Property Company LLC, 76.55 acres, property located on and near Waldron Road and Blair Roads. Tax map 32, parcel 3.04 and 3.05, and tax map 29, lost my place, my apologies. 29 parcels 41.01 and 41.02. Current zoning district R1 low density residential zoning district, proposed zoning district PDR R3 planned density residential zoning district with a base zone of R3. High density residential. Property owned by the Industrial Development Board of the City of Laverne. Mr. Logan.
Thanks. So Equitable Property Company is proposing this concept plan and rezoning, and it's now being called the Rock Springs Mixed Use Development. This would rezone 76.55 acres to R3 PDR. So the base district would be R3, which is high-density residential. And this property is located on the west side of Walden Road, as well as south of Blair Road and the new proposed Blair West extension. And across from this property is Arbor Ridge, the PDR that's currently under construction. And we'll see some more of this in the zoning map in just a moment. But the purpose of this plan is to develop the property for approximately 614 dwelling units, to include single-family homes and multifamily units as well. Also in the proposal is approximately 208,000 square feet of space to be used for commercial as well as retail and office, and also included that is proposed restaurants. The developers will designate approximately 2 acres to be set aside for future fire hall, and concept plan also calls for amenities including a pool, clubhouse, walking trail, and playground, among other improvements. This development extends south near Rock Springs Elementary School, but not quite all the way. And that's an overview of the project, so let's move on to the maps. So this is zoomed pretty far out. You can see, if you've looked at the book, you're probably familiar now with what they're calling the north parcel and the south parcel. So here at the very bottom of the screen is Rock Springs Elementary School and the T intersection at Lake Road and Waldron. So north of that, there's some property not included in this PDR, and then the south parcel begins where I'm pointing right now. And then north of there, this area here is the north parcel, so it's north and west of the south parcel. And then this is the Ridge subdivision immediately adjacent on the west side of the south parcel, and it's just south also of that north parcel. Zooming in, see the area better. So this right-of-way has already been dedicated, so you can see the extension of Blair Road and the accompanying right-of-way. So that's already been drawn on the GIS maps. Just across the road here, then to the east, across Waldron Road is Arbor Ridge, which is under construction currently. So the zoning map, this very large area here that's hatched is the PDR for Arbor Ridge. And then up to the north and west, you can see Carruthers Crossing, which is also a PDR. So currently this property is the orange color, which is R1 low density residential. And these are some photos of the area. This appears to be taken from the south parcel. I believe that is the ridge in the distance. And this is some more of the property as it appears today. And then this photo, there's this access road that's kind of informal that you can turn off of Walden Road, and that rough road or path will take you into the Ridge subdivision. So that's what that photo was. So moving into the design book that the applicant submitted, here is the cover page, and there's several pages in here, but I'll move to the north and south parcel. So let's start with this is the north parcel, and you can see the Blair West extension that kind of winds through there. This parcel is heavily multifamily in this concept plan. So they are proposing quite a bit of apartments on this parcel. And the northern parcel unit count is now up to, looks like 336 units for the northern parcel. And it's hard to see on the screen there, but zoom in. So the average square foot per unit, that's the 977 here in the green where I'm pointing. And then the 336 is over to the left in the blue. So they do have, of those 336, one bedrooms will be 180 proposed, with 144 two-bedroom units and only 12 three-bedroom. So this is in line with what we've been seeing over the last several years, that the three-bedroom apartments, the developers are not building those in the numbers that they used to. So nowadays you see mainly one and two bedrooms. So this is the retail parcel. Well, it's still part of the northern parcel because they have the retail sort of spread around. But in this diagram, I'll try to zoom in on the upper right. So this is the proposed, what they're labeling as retail food store. So grocery store type retail there, and then these darker blue rectangles would be like quick serve restaurant. So think fast food restaurant. And those are probably some of the drive-throughs that they're requesting with this PDR. And then they have retail and medical shelf space here next to Walden Road, and then out parcels 5, 6, 7 are could be retail tenants or potential restaurant with drive-through. Then the multifamily is in the rear of the property, and that's where you see labeled buildings 1 through 7, which is first floor retail and second floor multifamily. So it's upper story dwelling above ground floor retail. So the southern parcel count is find it here. I believe it's 242. So it's here at the bottom, just in the regular black and white, but right where I'm pointing, the unit count's 242. So that's the total for the southern parcel, and the average net rentable space would be 845 square feet for those. So you can see another diagram here that's got the southern parcel that I went over with the upper story residential. It's also got the space for a future food store or grocery store. So the southern parcel is quite a bit larger than the northern parcel. There are a few single-family lots with this proposal, and they're on this north parcel to the far northwest, close to Carruthers Crossing, but there are some single-family lots proposed back there. So this image on the screen shows you a typical buffer zone that's proposed, also with detention area, and just gives you an idea of the plantings and landscaping and how that relates to the roadway section. And of course, they have given us several examples of proposed retail establishments, as well as some of the residential images. And then this screen shows some of the medical office and prototype of a fire hall that could be built on the property. And they do have quite a bit of pedestrian focus with sidewalks and proposed walking trail. And then you've probably seen the economic impact overview in the chart that they provided. And then this is the development investment with the total cost. Looks to be around somewhere around $244 million. And then they show the potential merchandising plan, and then that continues on the next slide with examples of the grocery and specialty stores and restaurants. And of course, that's some of the chains, some of the national chains that they've worked with. And then they have a list of those retailers as well. And the right-of-way exhibit shows some of their plans for future roadways. And then we get into the really fine print with development standards. So, of course, left side's residential and right side's commercial. And when we get into staff comments, we'll break that down further. And then the list of exterior siding materials. So permitted in the book right now, the allowed exterior materials are brick, stone, stucco, natural wood accents with cementitious panels, and lap and or plank siding. And then not permitted, no vinyl siding, no plywood, no concrete block. And then, of course, roofing material permitted is dimensional asphalt shingle, laminated shingle, copper finishes, and standing seam metal roof. Not permitted is any rolled asphalt, asbestos cement shingles, or brightly colored metal roofing. And then there's a lot of detail here about architectural standards and building height and setbacks, along with massing and proportion of the buildings, and some of the patterning, especially with roof lines and windows, that sort of thing. Lot of detail there. And then that continues with the commercial side. They do say on the commercial characteristics, they can have 70% of primary materials, which would be full brick or thin brick, natural or simulated stone, smooth cast stone, or exterior insulation finish system, which is EFIS. Then secondary materials would be stucco and smooth metal panels and or composite or cementitious panels. And those secondary materials can only comprise 20%. And then with the 70% primary, that's 90, and then the remaining 10% could be an accent material, and then they have those accent materials listed. And there's also standards for windows, roofing, awnings, and the lighting. So it's pretty detailed there. And then this is a demographic screen that talks about the surrounding communities and the unit counts. So they give like an estimated population of the area. And the existing zoning, I think I've covered that. There is a utility slide that lays out some of the details of the water mains and sewer, as well as gas. Okay, and then we get to some of those areas that will probably have to be discussed tonight. But this slide shows some of the stream buffers, the approximate floodplain, and then proposed detention ponds, where I'm pointing up here, these dark black areas. And then there's a large pond to the south, of course, that is very close to Waldron Road. And then this is the site survey, and then the plant listing or plant palette that they're providing that shows the typical plantings that they would like to use. And staff has looked at that. A few of us have looked at it. So as long as there's no Bradford pears, it looks great. Looks great. And I think that's it. So we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a representative here this evening? If you would name and address for the record.
It's Alan Elliott, 3201 Trevor Street, Nashville, Tennessee, Suite 200.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lyde, did you have anything?
Yes, sir. Hold on just a second. All right, we had 4 comments. The first one is just kind of an update on a comment we had last meeting, and that was our utilities engineer, Scott Tatalovich, had done some very preliminary studies in that area and felt that this density would indeed overtax our existing system. As with every engineer, you give him more time, he gets less conservative, so he's done more studies, and he's continuing to do studies on this. And at this point in time, the density requested for this PDR can be accommodated by the existing system without significant cost to the city. It's going to come really close to maxing it out. So and that's with the existing zonings all around. That's not saying other people can't develop. It's if you rezone it denser in other properties, we're going to be overtaxing our system. But the system can handle this density on this property. The second one, they did not submit the hydraulic calculations required by the concept plans and the stormwater management ordinance. So on that, the engineering department considers the submittal incomplete. The traffic study was submitted, reviewed, and is considered acceptable. Just for a point that I would recommend that y'all discuss with the developer, they are recommending an additional traffic signal at the intersection of Waldron Road with Snowdrop Avenue in addition to the one the city is putting in at Blair Road. And I would recommend that you discuss with the developer to confirm that that will be paid for by the developer and not by the city. And the last one, the 5-foot contours must be provided according to the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, and they were not provided. Their contours are 10-foot. That's a relatively minor comment.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Well, I'll start. So on the comment regarding the traffic light snowdrop, is, first of all, is that going to intersect with your main entrance into the commercial property, about the same entrance?
It should be, yes.
Okay, good deal. And the cost of the traffic light, what's your thoughts and comments on that?
I would think that would be part of the developer's cost, covered by the TIF that we were proposed to work out with the IDB and the county.
Okay.
I've got a question for Jay, the engineer.
Name and address, sir.
Jay Fulmer, 2002 Richard Jones Road.
Howdy, Jay. Hadn't seen you for a while.
I know.
So you've got down here in this long list of comments and responses about the hydraulic portion that Gary was mentioning. You put down the, or I guess I'm assuming it's you, put down the detention ponds were calculated based on the proposed impervious area. Do you have the calculations to be able to send over to Gary and his team so they can validate it?
What we, right now, a lot of what we've done has all been based on the information that we have, which is, lacking the approved FEMA maps. And so identifying the exact elevations and orifice calculations that the concept plan, the stormwater management ordinance requires very detailed calculations. And without designing the whole site and doing an extensive amount of design work, several hundred hours of work, it's hard to meet that ordinance exactly. So I know it's a very well-intended ordinance, but it's hard to meet it on an 80-acre property. And so we can provide all the breakdown on how we came up with the surface areas we did. But meeting every element of that ordinance is something that we can't do at this time.
Okay.
And so we can work with them to give him whatever information we can at this time, but to meet exactly with how that ordinance is written, it's hard to fit this project into that.
And I know we're working a lot with TDEC and you mentioned FEMA as far as on this property. Gary, would that be a problem, being able to work while we're getting all this or while they're getting all this information together on it?
It would be a precedent setter. We have other developments of this similar size, and we have required them all to submit those calculations, and so far in my 2 years here, they have.
Okay.
So what you're saying is until the structures get solidified of what's going to go where in rooftops and square footage, you can't put exact numbers together.
So we can run calculations on volume required and identify volumes of detention required. We can provide that through surface ponds. We can provide that with underground detention. We can provide that with pervious pavement and several mechanisms to meet the ordinance. We feel really good about being able to meet the ordinance, in the built environment. We have to go through a very large floodplain study that has to be submitted to FEMA to establish those floodplain elevations. Those tie into what we can and can't do, whether it's surface pond, underground detention. It'll restrict some of the layout and some of the topographical constraints. We're working on a more detailed survey to be able to analyze the topo and do mass grading across the site to figure out exactly what what some of the surface constraints are. We know once we get to that point, it could constrict what the final density is that the site yields too. So there's several moving parts with the road that's being designed through there. It needs to be designed in conjunction with the floodplain elevations that are established. That's a study that we sub out to somebody who specializes in floodplain management. And, to date, we've gotten budgets of about $40,000 to $50,000 to do those studies. So it's a 200 to 250 hour study. So that's not something that we were able to do before the application with the city. So they all go hand in hand, and to have everything solidified down to the final calculations that the ordinance requires, that the concept plan, we've got a lot of good information. We can get that information pulled together, but there's still some missing pieces that'll take quite some time to get.
How long do you think it would take to put that together, just in a time frame? I know you say quite some time, but what time frame are you looking at?
I'm not sure what, with the conjunction of the roadway design with the IDB, if they have done any of the floodplain analysis, because those roads need to be designed in coordination with the floodplain. I know those roads the design plans are pretty complete.
Kyle, I know you've been working on Blair West.
I'd say Gary's probably got more on the Blair West with Kimley Horn, but, I mean, everything should be close to done.
Yeah, they're planning on being done with their 100% construction drawings by May 1st, so the hydraulic calculations and sizings are done.
So I would think it would take a few months for the full floodplain studies to be done, for all the final survey data to be incorporated, mass grading across the property. It's a very extensive effort to get that part done.
Okay, if I can interrupt, this is a concept plan level calculation. If you look in the stormwater management ordinance, it puts as a list for a concept plan, you have to do these. It's a much narrower list than the overall list that covers construction drawings and site plans. So it's very deliberately created to be at a concept plan when those surveys are not prepared, when you have nothing but a 5-foot contour that you can pull off the GIS. The purpose of it is solely to show that you have put enough area aside for detention and you've put it in the right places. It's understood that when you do the final calculations later, which will be much more detailed like you were talking about, that they may move, may change in size, but we just need a comfort level, because you're doing a great job of explaining why we need this. You're saying the study is going to show that some of the buildings may have to move around this and that and the other. That's exactly why this is done at the concept plan. But it is, if you look at the stormwater management ordinance and look under the thing, these are what's needed for a concept plan. That's all you have to do, and it's a much more simplified process than a full hydraulic and hydrologic design.
I may have misunderstood without some of it was stated. And so, but we can get you that information.
Okay, and I'll be glad to sit down and go over the ordinance with you and exactly what I'm looking for.
Sir?
No, I'm just looking at the items left on the list of what needs to be done, so we keep things coordinated. So then for the engineering, Gary, would you agree that number 2 needs to be some more work and addressed, which you just discussed, your number 2?
Number 2 is the only one that is significant from the engineering department standpoint.
And then number 4, you indicated there just is an adjustment in the booklet, correct?
They have 10-foot contours. The code says, the ordinance says 5, but as steep as these sites are, the 10 are actually adequate for the purpose. So I'm a stickler for checklist, you know that. But that one is not an important comment.
So then going back to Mr. Logan's list, I suppose we'll try and narrow down then, just so we keep things orderly here.
So I think number 1, and tell me if I'm wrong with this, Mr. Logan, it appears number 1 is addressed on page 26 of the packet, where you're talking about exact percentages for brick. Just to clarify and land, if I'm misspeaking any of this part from the booklet, you can correct me, but you've got multifamily, which I'm assuming is the apartment complex portion. Is that correct?
Correct.
The gated community. That says 74% concrete masonry board, glazing / doors, natural wood, composite wood, metal, and 26% masonry for exterior materials.
Correct.
So that's apartments. So essentially, using their terminology, it'd be 26% brick, 74% concrete masonry board, natural wood, composite, and metal. Correct?
Correct.
At the very bottom, Bo, of that list. Looks like the
Yes,
town.
for commercial, 50% masonry.
Nope, go over to the retail, residential side. Because you had down here for every home and/or dwelling. That's number one.
Townhome, 60% concrete masonry.
40% masonry stone for townhomes, 60% concrete board, composite wood, or natural wood. And then for the single-family homes, it's got 80% masonry or stone, 20% concrete masonry board, composite wood material, or natural wood.
Right, so that, I know that was added, so that should take care of that comment.
One thing I would add, because of an issue we've had with another subdivision, we need to define, if you've not got it defined in here, what is masonry?
Paul Bass, our architect.
Name and
Paul
address.
Bass, 1104 West Main Street, Franklin, Tennessee. So essentially, kind of dividing it up in the northwest quadrant and what I call southeast quadrant. The northwest is what's got the garden-style product on the multifamily, and that's where we're looking at 26% brick as defined as masonry, and the rest being a mix of board and batten, cementitious type lap siding, so forth, and that would pick up the remainder of that.
I would just say to the board, because what you're saying is fine, but what I'm going to say is, if staff's going to be contacted 2 years from now, when this starts getting built, and we need to define what brick is or what,
It would be 3 and 5
it needs
eighths.
to, it needs to state that clearly in here with what y'all want it to look like. That's just the only comment I've got.
And the materials that we're seeking to utilize are defined as primary materials in most every jurisdiction you walk into. So these are not what we consider secondary materials. We'd probably stray away from the ephes, so forth, that, because they're not durable materials, but everything is of a cementitious or a masonry value-add product.
Yeah, and we've got another subdivision that it says masonry, and we have had numerous
Yeah, no.
complaints that it's
Yeah.
just a masonry product. So
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
my whole
No.
point behind it, is just please, whatever you're envisioning in your head, what you want to see, it really needs to be clear in here.
Yeah, this would be traditional brick,
Yeah.
as defined as masonry.
I do think it's best to define. We've learned from our last PDR lessons, such as getting percentages, and that's just, it's, you learn something with every development. So, yeah, and I'm sorry, this is my ignorance, I'll admit that, but it's got on here glazing / doors. What
So-
is that?
So essentially glazing is just the glass package. So
Okay.
that's what's making up the balcony doors, your typical double hung windows, so forth of that nature. So we're just expressing how much glazing would be a part of that package that makes up those elevations. So there was the one sheet of the, what I call it, like I said, the northwest quadrant that showed the garden style elevations in the clubhouse and so forth of that nature. And that's very similar to the product that we'd be looking to deliver in that quadrant on where we're looking to develop the 3-story multifamily product.
Okay, and then define for me what, 'cause I think I have an idea, but I'm not sure if it's your idea. Define the concrete and masonry board.
That's hardy product essentially, and it comes in multi-forms. You've got lap siding, you've got the board and batten that looks like the strips that are 12 inches on center that run vertical, and then also you have hardy panel that comes in 4x8, 4x10, and it gives you a more modern look. So, like I said, we try to stray away from the ephes just because you can, shoot a rock through it with a mower, so forth of that nature. So, for durability, long-term value, we always like to stick to the masonry and cementitious type products.
Okay, because I know with one of our other developments, it was said masonry and hardy board was included with that. Now the whole things are hardy board.
Yeah, we would clearly delineate, and like I said, on those elevations, those were specifically designed, and they calc out at 20% brick. And anyway, from a durability standpoint, you usually want that first floor to be brick just for longevity, so forth of that nature, and then bless it. And then you transition up to the hardy, which is still a durable product, but it has to be painted every 15 or so years.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Just trying to keep this coordinated. So Bo, on your second one, the 35 feet, although it says application to BOZA, can this planning board not review that as well?
So when I read through the zoning ordinance, because they're going to request the R3 base, and because of the date they submitted, so they got locked into this old ordinance. So even though they may not start the multifamily for 2 years from now, and we may already have an ordinance that allows for story if they were to wait, they're locked into the old price. So they're gonna have to go to BOZA no matter what when they submit site plans, because they're locked into the old R3 base that we're no longer gonna have when they build these buildings. I don't think, you can't override it. If you pay attention to zoning ordinance, you can't just allow a 4-story with the concept plan, the way I see it.
Okay.
Because that can be
Now,
addressed.
I can be overridden, but that's just my interpretation.
But you said that can be addressed at site.
At site plan.
Site plan,
It
so.
can be. I just want you all to not wonder why this wasn't caught here, because I don't think the concept plan can override it.
Okay, I apologize, I'm just giving an opinion. I'm not planning, I'm engineering, but I was reading through this. The PDR section of the zoning ordinance has the statement, you cannot be higher than 3 stories. It does not grant an exclusion that the planning commission can grant. So I'd recommend you talk to Ms. Driver and ask her interpretation of that.
So at that point, it would need to go to BOZA. Is that clear?
Your question.
It's clear.
You looked at me.
No, I'm just looking down the board here and see who's, yeah. Okay, so number 2 needs to be addressed as well then. So number 1, I'm just going off the planning listing. So I want to make sure that you as the applicant understand what we're trying to get at. So on the design book, you know, the exact percentages, and looks like the staff, and I think the board is looking for, be clearly delineate what masonry products you're going to use.
Yes.
Obviously very important. So that list on that page needs to be clearly delineated, as you say.
Okay, good deal.
Okay. Obviously, number 2 is for the BOZA, as stated. Number 3, upward of 90% of total number of dwellings are multi-family. So, Mr. Logan, just want to explain to that, what can they do?
Yeah, so the current zoning ordinance says they can be at 30% multifamily, so 30/70, unless they show that it's a private community with a homeowner association and a property management policy.
So, because if the backside is essentially like a gated apartment complex, a management company would still be involved. It just wouldn't necessarily be an HOA. Throw it at me.
It's the air conditioning.
Yeah, so the.
I don't disagree. I
Yeah.
just have to put this in the report so that it's discussed.
So let me ask legal, if it's a private managed community, but it's not an HOA, because apartment complexes aren't HOAs, would that still present a problem? It still has a management component in there, and it's a gated private community.
I'm not sure.
You're supposed to have all the answers.
Darn. You need Evan for that. I don't know the answer. I'd have to look into that.
Because I would just think since there's no HOA, there's no HOA policies. I mean, the management company sets their management rules.
Correct. I would think that that's right, but I would want to double check that before I shot from the hip and answered with something that wasn't.
Okay, so call a friend.
I will say that from kind of the way we've talked about it is like the north units that are specifically gated. I don't think that's a question. That's private. But the question comes into play with the retail at the bottom and then the units at the top. That's where those are not gated, so how are we considering that a private
Okay.
community, basically, is where this is coming from, and of course, if they can explain how they're viewing it as private, that may solve it, it may not.
Well, all the multifamily will have controlled access, so it will all be private. The entire commercial / mixed use multifamily part of the development will be governed by documents that all of the owners of the different components of the development would be. So there'll be mixed-use, multifamily component, there'll be out parcel components. If those buildings are owned by the tenants themselves, they'll be governed by our rules and reg documents. That'll all be in place by the management company that maintains and manages the development. All the tenants, all the building owners will adhere to that set of that set of rules and regs.
I thought about this a lot in the last week, and what's in my mind to try to work it out is most of us in here have been to Seaside. You've either stayed there and paid to stay there, or you've had a friend that stayed there and you went, or you just drove through it. But like when they opened up the food trucks in Seaside, like everybody here would agree that that's a private community. They have businesses, they have shops. I can go in there and shop and never pay a dime to the management company. I don't have to be a tenant. I don't have to rent there. I can drive through there as the public. That's still a private community. So I'm not presenting this because I'm against this development or I think that it's a bad idea. I think that it will function like a Seaside type development, which is managed by a property management company, but yet the general public is still allowed in there. No one would argue that Seaside is not private. It's very private. So,
And exactly to your point, the way we would control access is this would be either a fob, key card, so forth of that nature. So you would have controlled access on the end cap stairs and also elevator access. You'd have to be a full tenant, or you'd have to have that tenant coming down to greet a member, or a guest rather, to come up.
family member,
To
yeah,
your
I
point.
guess.
Yeah, so you're exactly right.
I think that would be parking would be something that comes to my mind, though, is how would y'all manage the parking to where our PD is not getting called on a continual basis that I can't park at my unit because of all the,
So the way we've designed the parking, and we've done a decent amount of historical data on this, is based on that parking load, typically you're at about 1.2 spaces per unit is kind of what the average. And then we also will put a factor in of usually 3 to 5% bump for that guest parking type relationship. So since this is kind of more of a suburban, you're in that 1.25 to 1.32 factor per unit to balance both your typical end user and a guest when needed. And usually that guest loading, because we have the retail components, the commercial components, if you do a true traffic/parking study, it's going to balance out throughout the day, because obviously nighttime is heavily loaded on the residential side, whereas daytime hours are more controlled because everybody's off-site working, but yet the commercial retail is absorbing the parking. So we're going to have a decent amount of, if you think through the logic of it, you're going to have a decent amount of overflow parking because of the mixed-use component on that southeast parcel.
are you gonna have this signage stating where residents can park versus the retail? And that's the kind of stuff that's going to lead to us, that's kind of, in my opinion, what the argument is, whether it be public or private. And I think it kind of would go back to Bo's example of Seaside, because if you go down there, of course, you've got to pay to park. I don't know if that's the residents or the HOA or property owners that's getting that money. I don't know. And I don't know how they work that out. That's something, in my opinion, that would need to be in these documents that should be presented to where this board feels that, yes, this is sufficient to make this a private community. And I think that's the intent of your comment.
Yeah. Could their parking be gated in a
I don't-
park?
I wouldn't think you
near
could
the
with the retail.
units?
I don't think you would want to
Yeah, I
gate
don't know.
it, because you've got to build in that flexibility, because like I said, it cycles
Yeah.
heavy on the commercial retail during the day, and then at night, weekends, you're more driven on the residential product. So we've got to be a little forgiving, but I mean, you'll see in a lot of mixed use across the country, there's no gates. It balances itself out as long as those parking ratios, and typically the way you design is you'll kind of add that full value across the board for both the residential, the commercial,
Bless you.
the grocery store, so forth of that nature, and then you'll take about a 85 to 88% factor, and historically, that number addresses everything across the board.
Bless you. Now stop that.
So, moving on, Mo, so your number 4 design book indicates possible 50,000 square feet grocery store, but basically what you're saying, unless the applicant shows sufficient design considerations are presented to the planning by the developer for an exception to the rule. So just, let's be more definitive. I mean, let's talk about what we would be expecting if they want to go to these sizes.
Well, I mean, we're at the conceptual stage, but I would think the first thing that comes to my mind is buffers and the location of the grocery store or whatever it ends up being. I think 50,000 square feet is the size we're looking at. So whatever the retailer is, the first thing that comes to my mind is where's the footprint of the building and the buffers? I mean, those are design considerations. I don't know what else would be a design. And I took that straight out of the zoning ordinance, so the wording is what's in there.
There is significant, and I've got to scroll back over to it, but there's significant buffering between the ridge and the whole development. Because it was, what was it, 2661 goes through that residential buffer. And that area in between the ridge and the commercial, that's what this is referencing, is that correct?
That's correct. Paul, do you remember the distance between the house and the first building as well? So not only did we increase the buffer beyond what was required, we also set the buildings themselves back off that buffer line so that there was an intentional spacing between the multifamily and Harbor and the Ridge.
Yeah, for example, on the plan south side of that, where you see that U-shaped building, we are 226 feet away from the adjacent property line to the west. So we actually provided a 76-foot just green space buffer, and then we actually did 2 rows of double-loaded parking before we even got to the multifamily. So that all adds up to 226 feet. And then on that north portion where you're referencing the grocery store, we're roughly, I would estimate that probably about 140 foot plus off of the property line with a pretty deep landscaping buffer as well. And it's also got a pedestrian.
So, Bo, let me ask a question. Would it be acceptable to you and this board if they put no less than on there, no less than X amount of feet?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's great. I was just going to point out, I believe this parcel is what we sometimes call the Han parcel. Mm-hmm. So it's slated to be under their PDR, or it's commercial anyway. Mm-hmm. So there's no issue here to the north. So yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. So does that make sense? I mean,
Yes,
just you know.
Put some dimension strings, and we've got a few on there. They may have been formatted out, but we've got a couple that were critical more toward that residential side, where I know we had the single-family product that was existing that we wanted to show that we were 226 feet from that, just off the face of the building.
Okay, I'll just continue on here. The plan must show 20% open space for the entire development. What's our thought process
I
there, Ross?
believe that one was, I thought that one was supposed to be removed. I thought they already showed that. Yeah.
And just with the stream buffers and everything that we're showing on the northwest, we'll easily eclipse that number.
Yeah, so that one can be deleted already.
Okay, we'll just keep going down. Number 6, transitional screening, 2 per section, 3.130 is required. What's our thought process as the applicant, and what's our comment as a planner, Bo? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there again, some of that's going to have to be done at site plan submittal, right? I mean,
Yeah, landscape and so forth of that nature, where we get a little more detailed.
So you'd be okay of removing that, providing
I
it's
think
ensured
so,
it's
yeah.
going to be shown on the site plan? Okay, I mean, the board okay with that? Okay, the zoning ordinance requires a copy of the bylaws and restrictive covenants to be provided to the staff. What's our,
We usually get that at site plan.
I mean, Any comment on that from the applicant, how you want to handle that? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yes, so I guess we would maybe hope that it could be contingent upon this approval and we could produce those documents. We have a draft of a HOA document that with bylaws and restrictive covenants in it that we can provide you guys. It's more of kind of a template that we've used across different developments. Because this has been a little bit of a moving target, the end document final document has not been done, but we're happy to supply a draft that would need a lot of work done to it, but a draft of what we've used in the past.
Ms. Logan, would that be acceptable to you if they supplied a draft to get us, go get them?
Yes.
Meeting that requirement?
The draft would be fine. I mean, yeah, I think that satisfies the zoning ordinance.
Okay, good. Number 8, zoning ordinance does not allow 6 townhomes with the same setback as shown in the design book. The zoning only requires or allows 5 continuous townhomes. What's your...
Paul, haven't we removed the 6?
Yeah, everything I'm seeing is 4.
Go back to the latest northwest quadrant. We are now no larger than 4 townhome per section. So it's, and you can see it in that last.
Remember what
axon
page
you did.
that was?
I've
I'm
got the
actually
page
just running
number.
off of my
It's
There you go. Well, if you look-
Page 5 will show it.
23.
if you look in the top corner right there and the top left there.
Okay, I
each of
see.
Those darker green buildings.
I see them, yeah.
And the larger they get is 4 units per. And then we've got a couple a little further south, so there's a total of 38 townhouses that we've got laid out now.
Okay,
So it's
I see, yeah, with the 4,
4-7 and 2-3-7.
okay. I see that, thanks.
So Commissioner Logan, you okay with that?
That's fine, yeah.
Good deal. The last one, number 9, all takeout and drive-through windows and facilities require permission from the Planning Commission during this stage. Request should be made and shown in the design book. So the applicant, what's your thoughts of how you tackle that one?
Yeah, so, we're just seeing across the country with mostly restaurant-type tenants. They can be anything from, a fast food concept to fast casual to even sit-down dining. These type of tenants, especially after COVID, after all the to-go food that was sold during COVID, many of these concepts have kind of retained the takeout window. And so what we would ask is for on the out parcels to allow us to have a takeout window. There's examples like on Medical Center Parkway of even strip centers that they've bifurcated into 2 separate buildings that have drive-throughs through them. An example, I think Cava is the tenant in there that's kind of a fast casual type concept that would be a type of tenant that we would try to go after for this development. Mission Barbecue is an example. Ed Lee's now has a drive-through requirement. These aren't really what we think of as fast food restaurants. These are just, all sorts of restaurants. Maggiano's, for example, on West End has a takeout window, those type of things. So a lot of people are taking food to go these days. And so we're just asking for flexibility on that, on the out parcel structures, as well as flexibility on the square footage.
I would say on page 8, there is a note for potential drive-through and/or takeout on all of the out parcels and the jewel box. It says it on it also. So I think if y'all approve this, then basically we would view this as, okay, y'all are allowing drive-throughs on those areas.
You can kind of see just from the out parcel plan that, typically for what we think of as fast food or even coffee and things like that, you've got a pretty big stacking plan. And so we're not showing that. So the intent isn't to have a Chick-fil-A situation on this site. It's more just to have the flexibility to give the tenant offering and the intentionality behind selecting the different tenants that we're going after, giving them the flexibility to have that takeout window. slash drive-through window. And the jewel box, what we're seeing with those in different developments, like, or kind of like a Jenny's ice cream or Handel's type ice cream, which would have a walk-up window. Maybe, there would be a wine store or something like that where you'd get a takeout window and walk out into the patio that's part of the jewel box and have your glass of wine or whatever. So that's the intent.
So what's everyone think? 'Cause that's the one that's left up to us. Permission from Planning Commission, so.
Well, my comment is, that I don't think to restrict the applicant now with which ones they can and can't do. I think leave it flexible, so obviously they can manage the potential, people that are coming there that's going to supply items to the citizens of Laverne. I think to keep it open is a good idea.
And it can be addressed down the line as well?
Correct.
Okay.
That's site plan. Because each of these boxes will typically come through, just like we're seeing with Uptown Laverne, where each one's coming. Jim?
We got a head nod from him. Any questions or comments?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll tell you what, I'm taking over. I just want to
No, please,
just want
sir.
to qualify and pull this together if we can. So, obviously, the applicant. Any more questions for us? I mean, we've been through each one. Let me just throw it. They're on you as the applicant, except for we're going to work on planning number 3. The legals are going to look into it. So it's more a city and a legal opinion to work through. That's number 3. Let me just read some. Say number 3. Let me do that. That's on the amount of number 3 dwellings. So number 3 on planning.
Looks like it's half of 76.
So we're going to work that as a team. Let me just keep going here, Mr. Mayor, before we jump in. And then obviously the concern for the board is on the masonry products, we want to be clearly, give a list. This is what's going to go in. If it's not on the list, okay. And then obviously on the engineering 2 and 4, I think we just got through first. I just want to make sure we've been through the list, make sure any other questions you have for us to ask to make sure that the things keep moving forward. This is a huge project for the city, and I think we deserve, as the applicant, to let them answer their questions if there are any questions so we can move forward. So that's what I've got to say.
So for number 1, I would say it doesn't require a ton of work. Page 28 has some of it. I think the cementatious panels, the lap and planking siding just needs further detail. Whenever you have down brick and stone, we have a good idea what brick and stone is. And it's just that cementatious panels have where we've run into problems in the past. So I would just expand upon on page 28 to address number 1. Bo, would that be enough for you on that? If they expanded upon that?
I think as long as, they're explaining that brick is masonry, I think it's fine.
We can do that.
But you wouldn't be able to use cementitious panels as masonry product. Pretty much what we're trying to do.
Right.
If you want brick, you need to say brick or stone
Yeah.
in your percentages.
I like
can be
what
a
you said
permitted-
earlier when you said traditional brick. That was nice.
Yeah, there's no need to define something that's, if you're good with traditional brick, then that's what I would recommend, traditional brick. If
Yeah.
not, you're not going to end up with brick.
And I'll say this, just so it's on the record, because Land, I know you've heard me say this before, whenever we've looked at this, is I always love more brick. I know I've been through multiple developments in that area. I love more brick, so if there's always opportunities to go more brick, I always welcome more brick.
Noted.
Very good. Questions or comments?
I'm just, so I understand the composite or the panels, is that actually hardy board? Is that what that is?
It's, so Hardy comes in a variety of products, but
Right.
panel, lap siding, and board and batten.
And then just out of curiosity, below that, it says something about metal panels. Is that something that, what is that exactly?
So metal panels, they come off of furring shells, but it's not like a industrial metal building. It's more decorative, and they've got about a 20 to 30-year con art finish on them. So it's what we put on more of the Class A hotels, so forth of that nature. So it's a very expensive material relative to even masonry. It costs actually more than masonry to put up.
So kind of where on the building would that product go?
It would be accent panels, for instance, between windows, so forth of that nature, just to get a change in color, change in texture, so forth of that nature.
Is that something that has to be painted like hardy board as well, or does it come in a set color?
It's a Con-R finish, so it's gonna probably outlast the development.
It's a premium, kind of a premium product. I kind of see it really going more, using it more in some of the commercial elements where we try to break up storefronts and things like that. So it just doesn't look like monolithic, Cool Springs. You're trying to have something with a little more character, a little bit more depth, something that's just more interesting, really.
So do you plan to use metal then with the multifamily? Because that's on here.
I would, well, on the southeast quadrant, potentially, because we've got that mixed use where we've got the retail at the base and then the 3 stories of multi-set family. So there are potentials, kind of like Lan said, that at the base, we may break the retail up just to get a different vibe between the retail and the resi product that we've got up above.
If you think of something like the Hill Center in Green Hills where they've let the different tenants kind of brand and separate their different storefronts to, the owner's, final approval. That's kind of what we're wanting the flexibility to do, just so we have something that feels a little bit less generic and a little bit more just intentional is what the idea is, so.
Then you have the stucco on here. How much of that do you anticipate using?
0, probably. Ephes and stucco would be low on the list. The only time
Paper mache.
Ephes would probably come into play is if you've got some soffits or parapet type details, but it still looks like a stone. And more than anything, it's just to get a creative shape that is cost prohibitive with masonry. So it would be less than 2 to 3%, I would say.
A 0 would be great.
Now, and I would say if you're going to use that, you need to list it because I don't see
I know, seriously. It would
on here.
We wouldn't use ephes at all really on the multifamily or even that kind of mixed use part of it, unless it was just some very minor accent thing. You might see it on some of the out parcel buildings, like he's saying, for some of the trim and cornices and things like that.
For instance, so the elevation that you've got up, which is the garden style that we would have in the north quadrant, that's all brick, and then just to give some variation, the great thing about Hardy is it's got different exposure faces, so you can do a 10-inch, a 4-inch, 6-inch, and not only does it give you a change in color, it gives you a change in texture that really kind of makes that design pop. But that is traditional brick and lap siding that you see. Kind of those elevations there.
Yeah, and one thing I'd point out in this particular design, you don't have very long horizontal runs of hardy board. It's broken up by the facade of the building, the different components of it. I think where people run into problems is with the architectural design of some of these houses we see, where you see, a house that goes back 50 feet or whatever, and you got a whole run of hardy board, that entire 60-foot run, and it gets wavy and it just doesn't look right. What we're trying to do here with this design is to sort of break it up so the runs of that hardy board are not as long, and functionally it just looks better. It's easier to maintain. That's why this is one of the reasons this is broken up the way Paul's broken it up.
Well, just to comment, whatever goes in the book,
Yeah.
that's it. And the
Yeah.
stuff, as Mr. Brown says, 2-4 years from now, and it's in the book, that's what stuff's going to go by.
We got it.
Just talking through this a little bit, just so the other people understand, how things are moving forward. What's your timing for all this, and the work scope of starting which parcel, and just explain a little bit what your intentions are.
Yeah, so our intent is to break ground immediately on the north parcel. As the Waldron Road and Blair Road extensions get built and Waldron Road gets expanded, to start moving into that southern parcel and start that infrastructure and road work and that kind of thing. And then, hopefully with any kind of leasing activity, which we have had, We've had interest, but because we've had a moving target as to what we actually are planning and what we've designed and the boxes that you guys are willing to work with us on, we haven't started directly targeting actual users more than maybe Publix would be the most formal person that we've talked to. And frankly, the person that ran the Publix market for Tennessee has moved on to Fresh Market. So we've got a new person, Mike Lee is his name. And so hopefully going to be meeting with him and the economic development people in a couple weeks in Las Vegas. But as soon as those all that leasing activity and whatnot, that'll dictate how we kind of start working on the south parcel. Those out parcels and those road infrastructure components will be built probably first, and then just start building out towards probably the multifamily side of the southern parcel would be the last at this point, part of the development that we would do.
I don't know, it's an estimate, but to complete the whole thing, what do you think the time will be for that? Just an
Yeah,
estimate.
I'd say 2 to 4 years realistically to get fully built out. Something like that.
Can we get that in the book so that it?
That's all right.
It just
Sorry,
really,
interrupted you, but
depends
I'm
on,
just-
demand and how
Yes,
quickly
sir.
we can lease it
Yeah.
up. The nice thing about, I say the multifamily on the south side gets built last. The nice thing about that is that the retail component of that multifamily, as far as financing and things like that go and those type of developments, that piece will be built basically speculative when we go vertical with the multifamily, meaning we don't have to have a lease sign to be able to get that part of the deal financed. And that'll give us some flexibility too with different size tenants, maybe local credit, things like that just will add more flavor and a different type of tenant offering to this deal, as opposed to having to build a box for Publix where we're getting a 10 to 20-year lease that has to be in place for us to get financing to do the practical side of the development part of it, so.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Answer all your questions, Mr. Coates?
Yes, thank you.
So with the notes that you took, I guess my question would be for Mr. Graham. With the notes that you took, do you feel comfortable proceeding forward? Or are there still some items that need to be added to the book?
I think there's some work on both sides that need to be done. Obviously, the applicant's been through and they need to make some changes per staff's recommendations. And obviously, number 3, regarding the legal entity of the homeowners, that needs to get sorted out as well too. So that there's some things that need to be done on both sides, but I believe, the applicant knows what they have to do.
Feel comfortable with that statement, sir?
I am comfortable. I mean, I think just the components that Jay's got to work out with Mr. Lyde is, the piece of it, but most of this is ready to go. I just didn't realize that y'all would accept a draft on the documents.
So with that, I'll be happy to, if there's no further questions or comments, I'll be happy to entertain a motion.
Well, I think, look, historically, we work with the staff, and there's still some open issues here that need to get done. I mean, there's no ifs, ands about it. This is a huge project for Laverne, and I think the applicant knows what we're looking for. And to get the book correct, because at the end of the day, 2, 4, 10 years from now, the book is going to be the referee, and if we're not here, then somebody will have to pick the book up and run with it. So the items need to get addressed.
Is that a motion?
Motion, I'll then make a motion to defer and let the applicant work the city and staff to get the items corrected and move forward from there.
Our second.
We have a motion and a second to defer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We will see you at workshop. Thank y'all for everything that you're doing. We appreciate moving forward and working with you. Item number 4. Recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for subdivision acceptance, Portico Place, Section 2, Phase 2, and re-subdivision of common areas A and B of Section 2, Phase 1, requested by SEC Inc., property located off Blair Road, tax map 29, parcel 20.04, PDR Planned Density Residential Zoning District. Mr. Logan.
Okay, just a minute here, and I'll get caught up. Okay, so this is a request for subdivision acceptance at Portico Place Section 2, Phase 2, and which includes a re-subdivision of common areas A and B of Section 2, Phase 1. Thanks. This is 52 lots, and it's 15.69 acres. So you can see on the screen, this is a red line that doesn't show up that way, but this is the area outlined in red that they are requesting acceptance. And on this sheet, these are the common areas that are outlined in red. All three of those common areas. And I'll turn this over to Mr. Light. I don't have any planning comments. Thanks.
All city departments have completed their inspections. There are no outstanding items.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions or comments for staff? If none,
I do. I'm just trying to understand the re-subdivision of common areas. Is it pulling that into this phase, or is it just adding on to it? What is it doing? And then there's also quite a bit of red lettering on this about erosion control areas, seeding straws, backfilling.
Well, I'll speak to the re-subdivision has already been done, right? Since this is not a plat, this is just acceptance. So that was done, I don't know, whenever this was platted.
So this isn't changing that part then?
Right, it's not, yeah. And then the red letters, I don't know,
I never saw this.
I'm not sure who,
But this may have been some early comments we had, but these have all been long since addressed.
Okay.
any other questions or comments? We will entertain a motion to send a favorable or unfavorable recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
I'll make a recommendation for a favorable.
A recommendation or a motion for a recommendation for a favorable. Do we have a second?
second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. We will be sending a favorable recommendation for acceptance to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. On to item number 5, bonds and letters of credit. Ms. Ma'am.
Hello, everybody. You should have the bond list in front of you. It is up to date and current. If you have any questions, let me know.
Any questions on this item? Thank you, everyone, for your time. Meeting adjourned.